thank you for joining us here on the FOHSE webinar series. My name is Jason Arcand here with FOHSE LED, and today as our guest we have Sam Milton, founder of Enlighten Your Grow. Today we're going to be going over a little bit of everything in regards to rebates, LEDs, and how per state you can find the best value for your project. So with that being said, turn it over to Sam here and we'll jump into things.
Jason, thanks for the introduction. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's awesome to be here. And no, it's been great working with you guys. So yeah, my name is Sam Milton. I own and operate Climate Resources Group, and Enlighten Your Grow is our cannabis focused program where we really help growers like you find ways to afford high performance equipment like the stuff that you guys offer. And we do that through bringing no cost capital to the table through local utility programs. So this is kind of what we do. We've been at this for 5 or 6 years now. We work across the country. And we can, we're a partner to growers and different operators and consultants around the country to make sure that folks get paid for making upgrades to energy efficient equipment, such as lighting and HVAC and other good stuff. So yeah, looking forward to this.
Yeah, awesome, Sam. And yeah, thanks for making the trip down here. So I think we've been chatting back and forth, working together for almost 2 years. Mm-hmm. I'm having a hard time even remember where our conversations first picked up.
Flies.
I think there was some overlap on a project that we were both working, and then from there things kind of took off.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been awesome, and it's crazy to think how much we've done in such a short period of time, and also crazy to think about how long some of these projects have taken.
Yes.
To close up. I mean, we're a couple jobs we're working on now. Like the check is in the mail as we speak that we've been working on for months. I won't go into the details, of course, but yeah, it's been a long road, and hopefully, more miles to go.
Yeah, absolutely, and we appreciate all the support and education that you've not only brought to us, but also to all of our clients, and for everybody that we're doing stuff like this here for today. I still get on calls where some folks don't even know that there are rebates available in the state. Mm-hmm. And again, our biggest goal here is to provide value, knowledge, and education to our clients, just to bring more to the table to make sure their success is our success. So
yeah, absolutely.
Working with rebate programs, as we all know, it differs drastically from state to state. So maybe high level, you could just walk some of the viewers here through what that process looks like. Again, it's very nuanced, very different from state to state. So we'll keep it high level, and then as questions come up, we can address those either at the Q&A at the end of the show or offline as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm absolutely happy to chat with anybody, about a specific project, offline, no problems whatsoever. Yeah, and I hate to be the one that says it depends.
Yeah.
When someone asks me, how are rebates? Because they're always going to be so different. We have 50 states. Most of them have some sort of regulated cannabis, program. You can work with indoor growers who grow any sort of crop if they're using indoor lighting and HVAC. But yeah, every state's different, and every utility is going to have a different program. But generally, some rules of thumb that I would suggest for people to follow as they're thinking about a project. How can they find capital to build a new facility, or even expand existing one, or retrofit an existing one too. There's all these different ways people can tap these programs. But the first thing folks should do is figure out if their utility actually offers these programs.
Right.
Obviously, it seems like an obvious thing to do, but a lot of folks, like I said, don't even know that these exist. Mm-hmm. Which is fair. I mean, who would have thought a few years ago that your local utility would give you money for growing cannabis, right? It's like it's kind of makes no sense. And even just at a higher level, like why do utilities give away money to a customer for using less power, right? It's kind of counterintuitive, but they do. These programs are real. They exist, and the utilities do it because it helps them save money in terms of buying power. They don't have to build new power plants. They don't have to buy expensive power. And so for them, it's cheaper than having to build new generation.
Yeah.
So a lot of times utilities will advertise these programs, at least on their website. Most of the time, they don't do a good enough job of actually doing that promotion and advertising. Mm-hmm. Websites are generally where a lot of jargon lives and where information goes to die, or where insight goes to die. A lot of information usually, but not a whole lot of insight. So folks should, go to the website at the utility, see what's available, or pick up the phone. But a lot of times, the person who answers the phone is kind of a switchboard operator and doesn't know the program.
Right.
Or reach out to somebody, like me or some of my my fellow companies out there that do this, and say, hey, what's happening in Montana, or what's happening in where I live in North Carolina,
Yeah, absolutely. And how has your experience been working with FOHSE? Like, I think we've done a number of projects here over the past couple years.
Yeah.
Some shorter time frame, some, as we alluded to, take much longer due to the municipalities. But overall, how's everything been?
No, man, you guys are amazing. I mean, I love working with your sales crew. Totally legit, clean operators. There's like nothing shady going on with your guys, which shouldn't be like surprising. That should be the standard, right? But as we know, there are a lot of kind of shady operators out there. But no, I love working with the FOHSE team, and working in every corner of the country and world almost. So, getting a call from one of your sales crew saying, hey, what's happening in Puerto Rico, for example, like it gives me a chance to go and figure out what's happening there. Which unfortunately, nothing's happening in Puerto Rico. It's from the incentive piece, but Anyway, no, you guys are great.
No, appreciate that. Yeah, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with you. All the feedback we've gotten from anybody who's reached out and started working projects, both on, the FOHSE side and the client side, very positive, very successful the whole run. So
glad to hear.
Yeah, so let's transition here. So let's chat about, maybe you can shed some light on past rebate programs and how they've kind of been evolving and growing, whether that's for good or for worse. Kind of just lay it out for us, maybe where you see some of these going based on state.
Yeah, it's a big question, Jason.
I gotcha.
Yeah, and we don't have enough time to really get into all of the the moving pieces. But just folks should know that these utility programs are dynamic. They're set in stone for a year at a time. But from one year to the next, they're going to go up and down, and they may become more lucrative or less lucrative depending on what's happening at the state level, what's happening at the utility. If politicians are getting in the way and like starting to make noise.
Is that typically on a year, like a typical fiscal year, January through December?
Generally they move from year to year. Some states have triennial plans, so every 3 years they update their programs. But even within a year, you're going to see some changes happening. So for example, you may have seen in the news recently that the utility in Colorado, XL, had a little bit of a surprise this year, and they spent all their money on they spent their budget on these programs, and so they had to have a mid-year sort of like timeout, guys, and as a result, they've had to shut the program down, at least, and postpone even handing out checks that they promised folks, months ago, which is not cool. That's a surprise. Oregon had a similar thing a couple years ago, actually, too. They realized that they were spending way too much money too fast. So they shut their program down mid-year as well. But for the most part, you've got a year to lock things in. So this is kind of why we're shooting this in October. So the Q4 period is kind of the busiest time for me, at least. Because a lot of folks are like, oh my gosh, I have to get this project done before the new program year comes along, and who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, and we've been seeing a number of different like bonuses and kickers for year end. Can you kind of touch on that a little bit? Maybe, if the money's being spent too quick or this or that, what is the incentive for some of these bonuses? Is it simply just to get the project in the queue for projected future savings, or how does that kind of break down? Some are aggressive. I've seen like 20%, 30%, 40% kickers coming into Q4.
No, it's crazy. It's really funny, and again, it really sheds some light into how how these utilities are motivated, and what sort of budgets they're working with. Traditionally, the commercial and industrial sector broadly, hasn't been as good about getting money for these programs. In fact, I got my start years ago thinking about how businesses, in particular, can access these programs, because these utilities do have millions of dollars, to give away, and it's most companies don't know about them. They don't take the initiative to get the money. So for real, the C&I programs, commercial, industrial, they just don't have the money available, or they have budgets there, but they don't give money out adequately.
Got it.
But yeah, no, it's fascinating.
Okay, and just, nothing set in stone.
Yeah.
What is your outlook for going into 2025? Do you think a lot of these programs are really going to pull back on their budgets? Maybe audits might be coming for some of these larger municipalities that are dishing these out.
Yeah.
Again, not holding you to anything, just curious to hear your perspective on what 2025
My predictions for
your predictions,
2025,
if
I've already
you will.
can see a blog kind of riding in my head. Yeah, I think it's been interesting. Colorado, has seen they overspent. So they're definitely going to be, kind of reining their program in.
So with New Mexico and Minnesota also being on XL, do you think the lessons they learned in Colorado are going to drip down across Minnesota and New Mexico, or?
Yeah, I think to some extent, but I think state by state, these utilities come operate fairly independently.
Okay.
Even though they report to the same master, but the circumstances on the ground are so unique. But yeah, I think for sure, the Excel corporate got the memo. Yeah. The Colorado program kind of screwed the pooch. Sorry, if that's not appropriate for live television. But yeah, I think we'll definitely see some changes, and to some extent, the utilities do speak with each other, right? So it's not like a secret that Excel's in this situation. We're seeing it, for example, New Jersey is also going to change their program. They had a very lucrative program for a number of years, and I think they're seeing their outlays, coming out at a much higher rate than they expected. So we're going to see a transition in New Jersey as well in that program.
So you're thinking across the board, kind of just a pullback on the budget overall?
I think so. My 5-year projection is that these programs are going to be kind of much less lucrative across the board, and there won't be quite the same amount of activity in the incentive and rebate space that we'll see. And that's also a function of hey, at some point LEDs are going to become the de facto standard. In grow operations. Right now, you still get a lot of people, choosing to install HPS for various reasons. No judgment. But I think over time, LED is going to just kind of become the natural standard.
Yeah, that'll be the new baseline versus the HPS and CMHs of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. So once that happens, these programs will cease to exist. Their purpose, will have been met, and they'll just kind of they'll no longer fill that role. Because these programs, their entire existence is based on all right, how do we move this novel energy efficient technology to the market, and the way they do that is by subsidizing the cost to the customer. But once the customers have already adopted the technology, then it'll be something else though. Who knows, right? It'll be some crazy new fixture that you guys are hopefully going to be inventing.
Right.
I'm sure. Innovation doesn't end, right? So in 3 or 4 years, we'll be talking about something else. But
okay.
Yeah, that's my guess. It's dynamic, and so that's the thing. I always give people this advice: is that if you've heard a rumor or somebody last year got got all of his lights paid for their program, it's not necessarily going to play that way for you, so you've got to go and check kind of the current program year, and you can see what those terms are, because they're going to be different from year to the next.
Yeah, it's going to be fluctuating a lot.
And if you're in Kansas, you can't say, hey, my buddy in Colorado, got 100% free lights, because it doesn't play that way.
Right. Okay, understood. Well, thanks for your insight looking into the next year, 5 years
Just
plus. Just a hunch.
No promises, yeah.
No promises. Well, no, awesome insight, and again, thank you. So let's transition here, and maybe you can, again, high level, shed light on how this process looks. So maybe a client reaches out to us. Yeah. We start discussing a project. We start going through our due diligence here and doing light maps, having those kind of discussions, and then they ask, what's available for rebates. Yeah. So our process is we'll hand it over to you, and then maybe you can shed light for all the viewers here and folks how that process looks on your end, maybe some of the milestones that you hit, information required to get this application done, and then urgency. It's probably the biggest thing, right? You can move only as quick as the client supplies the information. So why don't you run us through that, just how that looks? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so to your point about urgency and timing, it's important that folks know that 90% of the programs out there, they run on a pre-approval basis. Okay. So we have to get in front of the utility before the purchase is executed. Because once that transaction happens, then a lot of times utilities are like, hey, you don't need us, because the transaction already happened. The product was ordered. So
it's important that folks can, they begin that exploratory process as soon as possible.
Okay.
I mean, so I don't mind, having a fairly early conversation with somebody, because at least I can be assured that we're going to get to the utility in time.
Right.
It means there are a lot of, theoretical projects that never, ever happen.
And we've seen those. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. That's life, right?
So sooner the better.
Sooner the better.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then once we have somebody, who's like, all right, they've got an address, they've got a bit of a plan that you guys are working on, then then we take that, make sure there's a program, for them, in their utility.
Make sure there's something there to pursue.
Yeah, and that's something that we do. We have keep a database of these programs, and we take our own advice too. Like we'll actually go and confirm the status of the program, nothing has changed, and then once we know there's something there, then we take whatever the proposal is that you're working on, we compare it to what they have now. If it's just a blank slate, then that's great. It becomes like a new construction sort of project, which means it's like there's nothing tangible for that to be compared to. So we make up a baseline.
Using HPS CMH, or how does that
whatever
kind of
the
fall?
state allows, whatever like the minimum code is. And that's kind of part of our secret sauce that I don't want to get too much into, but the way that we serve our clients is by helping them get the biggest incentive check possible.
Yeah.
And the magic of that, it's kind of a science and an art, is to convince the utility that the savings are as big as they can possibly be. Right. And so part of that equation, because it's math, part of that equation is the baseline. So what's the starting point? So we do that math, we do these calculations to see, all right, how big of this can we get it to be?
Yeah, what's the most we can get out of the program?
Yeah, exactly. And then at that point, it's really just kind of a function of communicating that information to the utility. And that's kind of where I come in and kind of, I think, really kind of provide a lot of values, because that's kind of the heavy lift. I mean, you do the upfront math calculations. That's work too. But the ongoing communications with the utility on behalf of the customer,
right,
takes a ton of time, right? I mean, it can take 3, 4, 5, 6 months of back and forth with the utility, to get these projects, over the line. A lot of times, the pre-approval can come pretty quickly,
sure,
which is great. So I hate to be the one to hold up, a sale.
Yep.
Because once the utility, says, hey, this project looks great, you can buy it, that's perfect. But then, there's a lot of steps after that point that, that I see. You guys don't always see that as much because, your job is done. But
we just hand it off.
Yeah, exactly. That's when
magic.
the customer and I are in touch and make sure that that we're answering all the utilities' questions. And I mean, frankly, the folks who run these programs on the utility side, they're awesome to work with. I mean, they're happy to work with the customer too directly. I mean, there's only Oregon, I think, is the only state where the customer is required to go through somebody like me. We're called a trade ally.
Okay, through a trade ally.
Trade ally, yeah.
Okay.
But there aren't many states that require a customer to hire someone like us. So any other utility, somebody can do this themselves. But the caveat is that they may not, do the calculations in a way that gets them the biggest incentive, and also, it just takes a lot of time to do this. And also, there's a certain vocabulary, that the utility kind of speaks in that doesn't really, it's not plain English. And so you kind of need someone who can do that translation, and that's where we come in as well.
Got it. Yeah. And then, so obviously, it'd be more lucrative to go through a trade ally because you might be leaving some money on the table. And I'm leading that to how some states, they have the prescriptive, and then they have the customized. So maybe you could touch on both of those real quick for the audience, let them know kind of what those differences are. Yeah,
absolutely. So as folks are going to be, thinking about what programs are available, in their utility, they'll see these terms, prescriptive or custom. Prescriptive tends to be where it's, one-page form, check a box, how many of these fixtures did you install, produce your proposals, and send them in. That's kind of, it's the easy way to
cut and
get
dry,
the program.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
The Colorado program was that way, which is why they gave out so much money, because it was so easy to go through that program.
Yeah.
There was very little friction, which is great. I mean, utilities they like prescriptive because Again, it just reduces the amount of friction on their end to get
Less
things
work
done.
overall, especially when volume comes into play. It's just
exactly. But you have to build in certain assumptions, or the utility builds in assumptions, into their model for what the savings will be, and they don't always get it right. So that's why the custom becomes kind of the default. The custom, program is where, all right, you have to actually sit down with the utility and kind of go through, how is the project going to look compared to a baseline, and kind of what do those savings look like, and how are you extracting those savings, and that's where you get into really complicated energy modeling sometimes especially for a complicated new construction project. We look at the energy flow across the entire facility, not just the lighting benefit, but also how does that interact with the cooling load, for example.
Right.
And that's a cool thing too. Prescriptive tends to be just lighting or just HVAC, and that's it. But for a larger, more sophisticated project, we can pull in all those equipment, that are being installed.
Right.
And really kind of paint a picture of the utility, like, hey, this is a super energy efficient, high performance facility, and that the savings of this facility compared to, a run of the mill kind of janky facility are going to be, enormous. So that's kind of where you need someone who can do that custom work.
Do that custom work, but also speak the lingo to make sure everything's just fluid from start to finish.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, so I know we're focusing on lights, but you guys can cover HVAC. What other additional equipment can you all lump in?
Yeah.
Some folks don't know that either.
Right.
That HVAC incentives, controls. Can you expand on what you've kind of seen and what some programs allow?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so lighting is the lion's share of these projects because, frankly, the math is a lot easier for lighting.
Right.
And the utilities, I mean, that's how they feel too, right? So they can do that, cut and dry. Dehumidification, is something that some utilities will pay for, others not. Standalone dehues are something that, for example, Oregon, Maine, New Jersey all pay for.
So again, state by state.
State by state, yeah.
Sure.
It all depends, right? And that's kind of like the overarching caveat with this is that it all depends.
Right.
But yeah, and dehues can be a little trickier because the baseline for HVAC, the baseline for HVAC is pretty good for the most part. So it's harder to find like massive savings unless it's like a really kind of custom, super advanced HVAC system.
Sure. Kind of like a one-off.
Yeah, exactly. So, but again, I mean, it's worth asking. So if folks are starting from scratch and really want to build a high performance facility, then it's absolutely 100% kind of worth doing some of the real work to pursue these incentives.
Right.
Because even in Colorado XL, they've given out their money for kind of the lighting piece through the prescriptive program, but the custom, that money often lives in a different bucket.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, again, you should always ask. Right. It does not hurt to ask, hey, what's up with this? And so that's something that, you ask us directly, or ask the utility, but we're happy to do that kind of, that interrogation of the utility, because we know who to call to,
Right,
again.
you have the people in your network,
Yeah.
get things done, help streamline it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Well, with that being said, I think we're going to transition over to some live Q&A. Mike, feel free to let us know what's going on.
All right, cool.
Cal asked a great question. He said, I've heard you say both rebates and incentives.
Ah.
I translate rebates as after the fact, putting all my capital into buying the lights first, then waiting for a rebate check in 3, 6, and 9 months. Versus incentives as upfront, utilizing the available utility incentives upfront as an immediate discount and only paying the upfront capital difference. There's a big difference between the two. Can you expand upon which one you want?
We talked about that before we started about the nuance between rebate and incentive. So great question.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks, Scott. It's yeah, I often use them interchangeably too, to be honest. Rebate or incentive. I think a rebate is kind of like, as Cal mentioned, just you get a check, after you've done the installation, and kind of that's it. Whereas I think incentive is broader. It encompasses a wider kind of range of ways in which the utility is able to provide some sort of resources to get the project over the line. Mm-hmm. So yeah, those terms I think aren't mutually exclusive. And so I think most times people say rebate or incentive, they kind of mean the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I use them interchangeably as well.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah.
you break it down like rebate or incentive, yeah.
Right. Rebate seems it's kind of like, you know, a simpler operation to get a rebate. It's like, because you can get a rebate on, you know, a light bulb at the grocery store.
Yeah.
You know, whatever, right? You know, whereas an incentive is, you know, tends to be more, you know, bigger projects.
Yeah, much broader.
Yeah. So I like incentive. You know, it's like there's more to it.
We'll stick with incentive then.
Yeah.
Sam, can you kind of expand upon some of the best rebates you've seen? What states offer some high-level incentives?
Yeah. You know, it's a big country, right? And again, it depends. It's always changing. But yeah, we're seeing some massive incentives in Michigan. You know, has you know, I mean, most of the and there's such a range, right? I mean, I'm happy, more or less, to work with small projects. You know, I've done, especially in my earlier days, you know, done projects, you know, with, you know, 30, 40 lights. You know, it's not going to be a massive dollar figure in terms of a check, but, you know, they'll get a few $1,000s. But, you know, you do some that are, you know, hundreds of lights, you know, pushing 1,000, and you can easily get into, you know, $500,000, you know, incentive range, you
Right.
know, which is pretty sick. I mean, it's insane. But yeah, I mean, it depends on the size of the project, right? I mean, you can have a small project in a really lucrative state, you know, it doesn't pay a whole lot, you know, but if you have a monster project in Indiana, which only pays like 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour saved, you know, it's, you know, you still get a nice little check. You can get, you know, upwards of, you know, $350,000.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, it all depends, right? It depends on the size of the project and if you kind of what the baseline is.
Yeah.
And greenhouses too. Greenhouses, you know, are great, especially because you can utilize, you know, the sun, right? You know, for the lighting, and if the baseline is like, hey, there's no controls on this HPS, you know, but we can utilize LED and controls, you know, then you're able to really get some nice savings from that. So
Right, with some of the systems that have the auto dimming based off the supplemental coming in.
yeah, you have to convince
again-
the utility that they wouldn't do that with HPS, of course.
Right.
But yeah, it's all part of the, you know, the case that we make. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. We got another good question that just came in. And I know this is nuanced, like a lot of the questions
Yeah,
and answers
that's
that we're
cool.
gonna get into.
We're good.
And Jason, I'm sure you can shed some insight on this as well. Which FOHSE fixtures have the highest rebates? Is it greenhouse? Is it vertical? What are you seeing right now? Veg? With higher incentive?
I'll let you take this one.
So I'll kick it off. So all of our fixtures are DLC UL listed,
Yeah.
so they do qualify for rebates. Adding to that, we do offer some pretty high efficacy versions and models at different wattages for all the different applications between, you know, veg, flower, indoor, multi-tier, greenhouse. So
Yeah.
we're in a very strong position to compete in terms of that. But again, I think it kind of defaults based off some of the information on the DLC UL listing,
Yeah.
as well as the efficacy, and then you pile that on top of what the state prescribes, right?
Yeah, you know, it depends.
Right.
You know, some programs, I think the Excel program was like this, right? Basically, the more powerful the fixture the customer wanted to install, they would actually get more money for that. Right?
Yes.
So customers were able to, you know, put in, you know, monster fixtures and get a ton of incentives, you know, as a result of that, just because of the wattage. Most programs reward you for electricity savings. You know, so you compare like 1,000 watt HPS, and if you can get the same production with a 750 watt light, you know, or 850, you know, 50 watt light, then, you know, then that's where the savings, that's where the money comes from.
Absolutely. And
you know,
I have seen it in some states where the fixture has to be 1,000 watts or else it doesn't qualify for a rebate. I know with some hydro shops that we're working with in projects in Canada, that was kind of like their baseline. It has to be 1,000 watt or more or else
Yeah.
it doesn't qualify for a rebate. And I think
Yeah.
that was kind of pushing them
Yeah.
to look at transitioning out those dual-ended HPSs for something comparable,
Yeah.
but you know, just with the cost saving associated with
yeah,
it.
they've all got their own rationale for how they run these programs. It's the weirdest thing.
And again,
you
state
know.
by state, right? Like
State by
nothing's
state,
consistent.
and it's not just state by state; it's also utility by utility, right?
Yeah, maybe
I mean,
that's
we were
the
talking
better
about
word to use.
Minnesota. I
Yep.
mean, Minnesota's got you know 36 utilities, you know, and they're all so different. You know, some of the investor-owned utilities like excel, they'll tend to have a good program, but if you're a little, municipal or like a local co-op,
Yep.
you tend not to have the budget, for these sorts of things. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, and the thing is too, when you're doing these calculations, if you're comparing HPS to an LED, the way that we kind of look at it too is that, kind of what's the total kind of light output of the project.
Right.
So if someone wants to buy, an A3i, light, then we say, okay, monster output, that's awesome. How many, 1,000-watt HPS, lights will it take to equal that amount of light output?
Right.
So you can still, folks can still go with the A3i, get that monster output, and still be able to get an incentive. But again, it depends on the state and the utility. So the devil's in the details. But that's what we do. That's what we look at.
And we've actually had some conversations with our clients where we've spec'd out their facility with the 1,500-watt A3i, and then we've reached out to you and got input on where the more aggressive rebates lie based on the wattage. So we've actually had conversations with the clients, maybe putting different lights on a tighter grid. Not always pushing to have more equipment in the room, but if it causes the rebate to go through the roof where they can get most of those lights paid for, we take that consultative approach with our clients based off your data on the program to kind of just coach them through where to get the biggest bang for the buck, especially when you're looking at the 1,500-watt versus some of our other models. We can always get creative with our light maps and how we lay out the room to ensure that we can still hit the light levels, but then again, bring more value to the client by, hey, here's free money if you go with this option. All things considered, it typically is the best route to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I enjoy kind of doing these comparisons. Like, plug in a light map with 750 watt lights in there, versus a dozen A3Is. You kind of see what the total wattage is going to be, and that translates a lot of times into kind of what the incentive is going to be. But it depends on dimming too, right? I mean, if a customer intends on using dimming technology, or if they're going to cap the fixtures at a certain level, like let's say they want a spectrum that an A3i can deliver, but they don't intend on running it more than 1,100 watts, for example, then depending on the utility, they'll let us put that into the math.
Right, they can factor that in where you're not going to be ramping the light up all the way, capping it at a lower.
But again, that depends on how flexible and generous the utility feels like being. Like, and we do that in Oregon. I think a project that is getting across the finish line now in Oregon, they've changed the rules where they're like, we're not going to buy it on face value that you're going to be capping the wattage at a certain level.
Right.
So when the utility comes in and does the inspection, a lot of times they will, sometimes they won't, but at least in Oregon, the folks will come in and do an inspection of the installation, and they'll want to look at your settings and say, hey, is this actually limited to the wattage that you said it would be, in the application. Right. So that's important too. It's like, when the application process is not just, a point in time, but it is a process. You got the application, you got the back and forth of the utility, and then you got the installation, you got the inspection. The inspection has to connect back, to kind of what the project actually was proposed.
Right. It all comes full circle.
Yeah. So
especially if they're going to be monitoring that data to ensure there is a reduction.
Right.
I know some utilities do that. Again, utility by utility, state by state, but I have seen that as well, where they come around a year later, collect all the meter data, analyze it, and see if it's even worth where that lands.
Yeah, and the California, they do that, right? Yep. I mean, I love California. You would think they would make this easier, but they're so petrified of people cheating, that they've created this entire infrastructure around how do you keep people from doing anything that is could be even construed as cheating. So yes, the program they have now in PG&E is only pays out on observed power savings. Okay. And they'll look at your utility or your consumption on a quarterly basis after the installation. So you won't even see your whole check that you expect until a year after you've installed it.
Good to note.
Yeah. So it's a pain. And so for folks in California, have faith. That maybe it'll happen, but don't count on it.
Right.
Which is, I hate saying that, but we'll do the work. We'll certainly kind of look at folks. And as far as how we work with folks, we only take our cut after the utility has paid out.
Right.
So we'll ask for a small down payment just to kind of keep things moving. But yeah, basically the better that our customers do, the better we do. And so it's all just a function of like, all right, how can we help our customers get the biggest check they could possibly get.
Yep.
So it's all part of like having that conversation with the customers, seeing what works. And so yeah, grateful for you guys to be able to help facilitate that conversation. And
yeah, of course,
you guys are pros at this.
Yeah, try to take as much work off your plate before we hand it over. So Mike, you got some more for us?
Yeah, another great question that just popped up. Can you touch a little bit more about HVAC incentives? What type of equipment is usually eligible? And do we need to apply for HVAC at the same time as lights?
Yeah, this is a great question. So yeah, chillers are something that you find a lot of incentives for generally. I mean, they're the 5-ton rooftop units. That kind of is the baseline. So you're not going to see a lot of incentives for that. But where you have a package system, which includes humidification and cooling in the same system, where you actually have some heat recovery going on, that's where you'll see some incentives. That's where you'll see some of the utilities kind of getting excited to offer money for the HVAC piece. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing a retrofit project, and you're working on the lights, at phase 1, and then the HVAC comes in phase 2, then do them separately. But if you're building a facility from the ground up, then absolutely, it makes the most sense to get those in together, and that would really be through a custom program,
right?
Because that's when you can say, all right, how the lights and the HVAC are going to work together. In tandem. And so we can do that, that 3D energy modeling even for a larger new facility, to really see like how all these different moving pieces, that they work together. So that's why we do like to see kind of HVAC and lighting come in at the same time for a new project, but it's not required. And for a prescriptive program like the Oregon's, they just want separate applications for each.
Oh, okay.
So some states will require prescriptive. Like if they have a prescriptive program, like you can't even do a custom. Some only do custom, and some who have both, you can kind of, you can do it. Like Colorado, you can kind of propose a custom. if criteria for the prescriptive didn't work out.
Sure, reoccurring theme.
Yeah.
State by state.
I know.
Utility by utility across the board.
Yeah. It's so annoying, and it's so. But the big picture is just that there's money for the most part out there, and it's worth it. It's worth asking the questions. At least it costs nothing to ask a question.
Right.
But then if there's a there, then you kind of need to schedule out, or at least have a plan for how you're gonna get after that. Either have someone on your team, be the point person for that, and make sure they don't drop the ball, or ask a pro, to take that on, for you. But yeah, these programs are crazy.
We got a very good follow-up question from Cal, and I think this might kind of tie into potentials for financing the project up front while they wait for the rebate check.
Yeah.
But he's asking, as a large grower, his question is, do either of the companies take the rebate or incentives available from the utilities and mitigate the upfront cost of the technology for myself as a grower? In other words, if the project is $100K and the rebate is $80K, could I simply buy the technology for $20K up front with the rebate proactively applied to the purchase versus initially paying the whole $100K and then waiting for the $80K rebate check to come thereafter?
Yeah, terms, right?
Terms. Yeah.
We were talking about
terms. Well, this would probably be a good time to, speak on the financing partner that you've brought to the table. So a gentleman named Jeshua through NEC Financial. Essentially, Cal is going to be coming in to help ensure that we can do those type of programs. So while we don't do any in-house financing here at FOHSE, we are going to be looking to leverage Sam's partner here, Jeshua from NEC, to come in and help structure deals as such, where again, you're not absorbing that whole upfront cost, but again, utilizing a financial intermediary to ensure that we can get the deal done, leveraging the rebate against the cost of the lights.
Yeah. So the way that works, Cal, is that you've got a $100,000 project. You expect to get a $20,000 check coming in. So however you want to run it with FOHSE, and with NEC. So NEC can give you a $100,000 loan right there. That gets a project executed, and then however that $20,000 comes in, you get that, and you can either use that to however you want, right? You can cover some of the rebate to cover that loan, or you can use it to pay down other more expensive loans that you've taken on, or credit cards or whatever, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it's a great resource. I mean, so the incentive piece is the no cost capital, and our partners at NEC Finance can bring low cost capital, which is great because and maybe you can have you should do one of these with with them.
That's the plan.
But yeah, I mean, there have been extraordinary rates, for cannabis growers for so long. It's a breath of fresh air to see that maybe there's some more, just some operators, some lenders that are like normal businesses, and treat cannabis growers like they're actual a normal business. I mean, maybe normal, use that term loosely.
As you will, yeah.
Because it's still kind of an odd duck as far as business goes. But but I mean, you guys are spending money to grow a product and you pay taxes, you should be treated like a legitimate operator.
Agreed.
Yeah.
What type of traction do you see coming from traditional agriculture? Is there a lot of traction in that field, or are you mostly dealing with cannabis operators currently?
Yeah. I mean,
I think for FOHSE?
Yeah.
So obviously our bulk of our business here at FOHSE is cannabis. That's where we started. That's where we've excelled.
Yeah.
Transitioning into traditional ag, we're seeing that pick up greatly as we redesign and release new fixtures that cater specifically to the leafy greens, the vegetables, the flower markets of the world. Something we're aggressively pursuing currently.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to touch on some rebates maybe you've seen or any projects that you've done real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, really, we'll work with any grower of any crop. And the cannabis guys are great again because, tend to buy lots of equipment, and use a ton of power. But, if you're growing leafy green, or tomatoes, you may not use as much power, but you can also get federal dollars, right? So, so if you're cannabis, I didn't really mention this, but as folks know who are in the cannabis industry, you can't get USDA money, or federal dollars for your project.
Can't get anything.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're growing a non-cannabis crop, you can get money from the USDA and from other resources to pay down your project, and the utilities for sure. I mean, they work with anybody at this point, which is so cool.
So hemp being federally legal, would that be something that falls into that category then?
Yeah, I mean, if you're growing a crop that's not cannabis, then you can tap that USDA money. You can tap other resources that the feds offer. It may not make a difference on the rebate side, and that money is there, regardless. But again, it depends on, as far as the utility rebate goes, how much would that project that you're proposing, say versus the baseline, because the baseline is going to be different, if you're growing leafy greens than it is for cannabis, so that's going to affect things, which is why, hey, if your buddy got, $500,000 check for his project growing cannabis, you may not get a $500,000 check for your leafy green project.
It's not linear.
It depends on the equipment that's being installed. But yeah, non-cannabis crops, good to go.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you service clients outside of the United States? If I have a grow in Thailand or Australia, what does it look like? Can I come to you? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, come to us, absolutely. We'll look over your project and and explore those programs. In Canada, we've got some projects that are underway. The Canadian provinces and the utilities operate a little bit differently, but there's money there for sure. I think most of these programs that we're used to in the U.S. don't really exist in many other countries. They've just got their power tariffs are different. for example, in the EU, LED is really kind of the only way to go. I don't think you see a ton of HPS, at least in the cannabis space. At least in for most crops. Maybe you can contradict me if that's not the case. That's kind of what I understand anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, wherever this program, I mean, I'm happy. Look, I kind of enjoy doing the research, to be honest, and I have a team that does this for us too. We love learning about what's happening and in Southern Australia, right? Because something new could pop up, and there are could be opportunities. I would think Thailand, probably not a very sophisticated energy efficiency incentive kind of regime there, but Australia actually does incentivize renewable. So solar is another piece too.
Oh, okay,
So a lot of what we do is on the energy efficiency side, but our mission is really helping our customers reduce their energy costs, their energy usage, and ideally reduce their environmental footprint, hence the term climate in our company. We love being able to provide resources to help our customers, adopt solar energy as well,
right.
And use other mechanisms to reduce their energy usage, not just going through the rebate programs. So Australia has incentives for solar, and a lot of U.S. states also have incentives for solar.
So all they got to do is
talk to that too.
Yeah, all they got to do is reach out.
Yeah.
Let them know where you're at, and then you get to do what you like to do. Go on the hunt and see what you can dig up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Awesome.
Where it's basically any opportunity that an operator has to reduce their footprint, we can either get it done for them, or we know someone who can help them out with that.
Love it.
Yeah.
I guess we'll wrap with that. Well, thank you for everybody who tuned in today. Again, thank you, Sam, for making the trip down here to join us here in Vegas. Yeah. Again, Sam Milton with Climate Resources Group, Jason Arcan with FOHSE. If you guys have any follow-up questions, please reach out, and we'll be sure to take care of you. Thanks again.
Thank you.